Hello and welcome back to Simple Time Studios, where we recount epic tales and solo roleplay for your entertainment. Today we will be continuing Psion Novastar in Ecumenopolis of Mystery, Part 2, continuing right where we left off in Part 1. Waking up the following morning with a slight groan, Psion Novastar rose to his feet and gathered his equipment and samples before leaving the hidden shelter and heading back up to the building atrium. After a few minutes thinking about it, he decided to head back to the base camp to see if he could get some time in the communal lab to analyze the plant specimens he couldn't identify earlier. If not, then his lab aboard the insatiable Curiosity would be more than enough. He could keep exploring, taking himself closer to the Megalotropolis's massive park, but that would mean the longer it would take him to get back, and he only had so many containers for specimens on him. Ultimately, that made his decision for him. He decided to head back and see if he could meet the other camp residents he was likely going to be spending a while with. Who knows, maybe one of the others would know of a shortcut or something that would take him to the park more quickly. He didn't hate walking, but there was still only so much distance any sapient being could reasonably expect to cover on foot. Munching on a ration bar, Psion left the abandoned apartment block and returned to the street. He began to hike back towards the towering spaceport, his eyes and ears open for trouble. Who knew what he could run into by the time he returned to the research camp? Okay, does Psion encounter anything on his way back to the camp? I give it a 50-50. And 90 says no. Okay. The trip was long but uneventful as he walked through the deserted streets of the sprawling city. By midday, he was back in the cavernous halls of the spaceport terminal and making his way back to the Orion Commonwealth encampment. Does he hear or see anything? Again 50-50, and 72 says no, so he makes it the rest of the way to the camp without incident. Nothing happened as he entered the Commonwealth camp and stepped into the communal laboratory. A few minutes with the camp's computer network later, he stowed the samples into storage, logged his samples, and put in a request for some time with the analysis equipment. Done, he went to the camp's cafeteria to see what was for lunch and try to meet with some of the others. Raven Goldmeadow was in the cafeteria speaking with a human that Psion didn't recognize. Off in a corner, a second Lapine Orion watched the conversation between the Orion expedition leader and the armored human explorer. Judging by the second female's dismissive attitude and general contempt, this was likely Stardust, the computer specialist. Psion arrived in the cafeteria just as the human talking to Raven audibly stated, "I was trying to reach you for a couple days now. We're missing one of our people and need help finding them." Raven was visibly confused by this. "Why didn't I hear about this sooner, Raymond?" she asked. "I tried sending you a message over the general channel, but it kept disappearing into the void. And when I tried with the other Orions that talked to us regularly, I was getting the same thing," Raymond, clearly the leader of the Sol Federation base, explained. Raven looked at her guest, then turned towards Stardust in her corner. The look of raw rage Goldmeadow shot at her subordinate was uncharacteristically Orion, but at the same time, Psion had the distinct impression that this was something that Stardust had been overdue for a long time. The Lapine computer wizard flinched, her bravado briefly vanishing as she bristled under Raven's glare. "I see," Raven began icily before turning back to her guest. "I'll take care of the issue and see how we can help. Who is missing?" "Chen. Her son went to try and explore the theme park district himself, and she went after him. So far we found him, but not her, and she's not responding to her communicator. I hope she's all right. The robots the original builders used for that place seem to be a little quirky lately," Raymond replied with a shake of his head. Theme park? Psion asked politely, interjecting himself into the conversation. Raymond looked up. A lean, middle-aged man in the light armored uniform of the Sol Federation Trailblazer Corps. His eyes lit up with recognition as he looked at Psion. Psion Novastar? The Commonwealth Explorer? Major Raymond Dunner, Federation Trailblazers, Raymond introduced. The Urson field researcher nodded back. Yes, that's me. I came to this planet to conduct some research, but I'm still struggling with just how big the city is. I tried to trek to the park only to turn back to deposit my samples and see if there was a way to travel the city quicker. Though it sounds like you have the more interesting problem that needs to be solved. Raymond laughed. I might be able to help with that. I have several rec troopers and engineers working on the city's subway system. Though right now it only connects the spaceport with this massive amusement park to the south. And that is where you lost your person, Psion replied. Yes, I already sent one search party to look for her. They haven't found her yet, but then it's a very big place. We estimate it's easily several miles to a side. I came to ask for help to see if we could put together a few more search parties. Psion nodded. It would distract from his original plan to survey the megatropolis's overgrown city park and collect plant samples for further study, but at the same time, someone was in trouble and in a place that sounded like an interesting location to explore. I'll help. When are you leaving for that part of the city? He asked. As soon as I can get any volunteers from you guys. I've already assembled a second team out of my people. You can form a third. We can cover more ground that way, Raymond replied with a nod and a smile. The matter settled, Psion got himself some lunch and tried to pretend he didn't notice that Raven had taken Stardust off to her office, or that there was suddenly the muffled sound of someone yelling at someone else within a largely soundproofed room. Once he finished eating, Psion gathered his gear and made sure his equipment was fully charged before heading out of the Commonwealth camp. The subway entrance was easy enough to find, a broad stairwell leading downward that several Orions or humans were walking down. The spaceport subway terminal itself was a series of platforms. Multiple tracks for electromagnetic monorail trains led off into dark vacuum tunnels. The tracks and their trains inert from a lack of power. Yet there were clear signs that the humans were making progress getting things working again. One of the trains hummed with power. Physical signs translating the alien station names and route maps into Federation Standard were hung on empty walls, and a single general-purpose stationary universal constructor had been coaxed back to life. The other volunteers were boarding the one working train, so Psion followed after them before taking an empty seat towards the middle between the humans and the Orions. Much like many other times, he found himself becoming a bridge between two very different worlds. Once the train was loaded, it was sent off on its way. Smooth, featureless tunnels quickly became a blur as the vacuum trains zipped along towards their destination. Once again, Psion was impressed by the sense of scale of the entire Ecumenopolis he was exploring, not by what he could see, but what he could feel. With no real frame of reference outside, there was no sense of progress once the train finished building up speed. He knew they were moving, but at the same time... So, you new here? One of the humans, a younger male dressed in the exoskeleton of the rec troopers and seated across from Psion, asked casually. Was there something that gave it away, Mr. Psion asked, letting his voice trail off. Corporal Rafe Gonzalez, rec troopers, he began, his voice having a Latin American accent Psion couldn't quite place. The bear's knowledge of humanity wasn't that elaborate. You were starting to get the look newcomers get when they haven't realized just how long it takes to get from one place to another around here. Even with the train, it takes about an hour to get to the theme park district. And how long does it take to get there on foot? Psion asked, already suspecting the answer, given how fast he's seen trains with this technology go. Oh, about a week, Rafe replied with a chuckle. That sounds correct, Psion nodded as he went over the math in his head. So what brings you here? Rafe continued. I originally came to explore the City Park district, catalog its plant life, and observe the park, the robust Orion explorer replied. The big one that had like 3 separate biomes that somehow are all fairly healthy despite no one being here for about a century? Or one of the other smaller ones that soak up the waste heat and generate oxygen? Rafe asked. I wasn't aware of any others, so the main one, I guess, Psion replied. Rafe looked like he had more to say about that, but then the vacuum train came to a stop and a musical chime echoed through the car. Looks like this was their stop. Standing back up, Psion slowly followed the others out of the train and onto the platform. Looking around, the towering Ursinoid saw that the amusement park station was appropriately decorated and gave him a rough idea what might be waiting for him on the surface. Colorful murals of cheerful characters and landscapes cover the walls, leading up to the stairs and elevators up to the surface. Were these pictures an artistic depiction of the original builders or something else entirely? Psion didn't have much time to ponder this before having to follow after the others. The station was otherwise much the same as the main terminal at the spaceport. Federation standard translations hung up next to alien signage, an attempt at restoring functionality to basic utilities, and maps of the area directly above the signs. He had just enough time to look at the human map of the district, scanning it with his smart goggles, before he had to hurry and squeeze aboard an elevator going to the surface. On the elevator ride up, Psion wondered what sort of amusements the city builders liked so much that they would build a whole park dedicated to them. And after disembarking on the surface after the others, he still had no idea. The surface entrance was a large paved field that spread out roughly several kilometers in any direction before quickly surrendering to a massive skeletal tower that ringed around the field. More brightly colored signs pointed towards what Psion could only assume was the main entrance. The others continued to head towards the entrance. Does anything happen while the group walks towards the entrance? I give it a 50-50, and 10 says yes. Okay. Psion will make a perception check to see if he notices anything. 10 says not really. A flicker of movement caught Psion's eye once the search party entered the tower, but the moment he turned his head to look at it, the thing vanished. And as he looked back to follow after the others, his pocket computer began to buzz in his jumpsuit pocket. He pulled it out to look at it and found another of the park's mascots appear on the device's screen next to a handful of alien text. While part of Psion was tempted to delete and purge the program trying to install itself onto his pocket computer, it was too much of a coincidence that a program with the park mascot's likeness was trying to install itself on his device as he was walking up to the park's entrance. Surely they had to be related somehow. Okay. Is there anyone nearby that he can ask about this program and bounce ideas off of? I give it another 50-50, and 14 says yes, so very much so. Looking up from his pocket computer as he walked along with the other explorers, Psion noticed that Rafe had fallen in beside him as the park entrance slowly came into view. Do you know anything about the program that installs itself onto wireless devices in this area? Psion asked. Yeah, Chen mentioned something about it before she disappeared looking for her kid. Chen thought it might be from the park's still functional computer system, but that's all I know. She didn't get far on figuring it out before she got lost in here, Rafe replied. Psion nodded and promptly ran a diagnostic scan to analyze the program as they walked along. Okay, Psion attempts a computer's check to diagnose what's happening and gets a 13. He has an idea what it is and will play with it in a bit. Then it will burn a genius point so he can use the plan. I figured it out. When the scan completed, Psion had determined that the strange program trying to install itself on his pocket computer wasn't malware and did come from the park. Letting it install and playing with it for a bit, he figured it was some kind of program for park attendees. Maps of each district of the park, directories. By the time the group all walked through the main security gates, he had a rough idea how to use it. Whether or not it would help him find Chen was a different question, but at least he had a map. Okay, once past the front gate, the search volunteers were each given individual sectors of the map to search. Psion compared the grid map to the one he got from the park app, then looked around at his surroundings. The theme park continued much of the same industrial architecture as the larger Planet City, but there was an abundance of murals and statues devoted to the park's mascot. Faded signage written in the local language directed him to various attractions. Okay, going to roll a 6-sided die to decide which attractions Psion has to search. I asked a couple of friends on Discord what would make good futuristic attractions. 1-2 is Bounce Golf, 3-4 is Robot Arena, and 5-6 is an augmented reality maze. And I get a 4. Okay. The alien script was still a mystery to Psion, but the images in the park app depicted the park mascot in a friendly robot battle with visitors. A robot fighting arena in a park where the robots were reportedly getting quirky. That was where he had to search. Psion pinged the attraction on his pocket computer, and a direction marker appeared on his smart goggles along with the distance to that attraction. Ambling along after the others, he walked along the long thoroughfare and midway, snaking through dozens of attractions, ranging from the conventional to the fantastical. Roller coasters, holographic and augmented reality funhouses, a bouncy obstacle course that looked like it involved some form of anti-gravity and played a game that vaguely resembled the human sport of golf. One by one, the others split off to search their assigned locations, and soon Psion was alone in front of Robot Arena. Hopefully he would find Chen, the human programmer, here. And hopefully whatever else waited for him wasn't particularly dangerous. Looking around, he got the feeling something was watching him. End of chapter.